Would you please try it and drop me a review? The victim totally executes a super suspicious untrusted.exe. The even defender says you should probably not execute this. Malware scrapes the cookies, their token, and as much stuff as it can get, calls out to a reverse proxy. That proxy then goes to a VPS, which does the logic of validating the customer ID to make sure it sends it to the right webhook, and then sends those tokens to the appropriate webhook. A fun fact is a lot of these authors, the malware authors, we'll call them, the developers. This may come as a shock to everyone here, but they're not very scrupulous people. They're actually very shady. And so a lot of them end up being what's called dual hooked. So at that VPS, where there's the essentially the API sitting there waiting for those requests to come in, it actually looks and says, hey, is this account valuable? And things like it would look for as very rare badges, right? Like a developer, a bug hunter badge, like a first day supporter, because those accounts apparently garner more interest from the people they're willing to sell to. And it would send them straight to the admin's webhook. And one thing that we noticed that was always really funny is the customers would complain about this. And the admins would like shrug and be like, I don't know, you're probably using it wrong or whatever. Try it again. It's probably working. And then we have actually a live picture from when a customer found out that the malware author was taking their hard-earned cash. So very surprised, as you could tell.
So here's an example of essentially what you would receive if you were a customer. So you would set up your own private Discord server, you would set up a webhook, and then you would give that to the BBY bot in their official Discord server. And then you would receive an executable, and then you would go on Discord and you would send, a message to some random person saying, hey, I'm a game developer, run my game. And then if a victim ran the executable, the second that it was ran, it would read from your browser data, and then it would send an HTTP request to bby.rip, and then that would go to your webhook, where you would receive a message like this that has everything from your sessions file in your browser to your URL history, as well as the information from your actual Discord client, which the malware would actually inject itself into as well as sort of a persistence method.
So after running into this and reverse engineering the malware and finding this group and seeing what they were up to, suddenly we had a new mission, and that's to do anything that we could to disrupt Baby's operations. So objective one that we decided, cost them as many dollars and as much suffering as we could by reporting their infrastructure to providers for termination as soon as we found out about it. So just a couple providers that they rotated through at some point in time. Discord is obviously like one of the central hubs for this. So there's no getting away from that. At some point they started using some less reputable services that weren't so much either I can't remember them or they weren't worth naming. So they were a little harder to get taken down. Later on, we'll talk about how we met the Vaccinators, and through them, we were able to get some really good industry contacts at like these kinds of companies, and they were able to help us really start expediting requests to take down malicious domains and stuff like that. So objective two.
So in addition to what he talked about, we also wanted to do a little bit of trolling, right? So, with these webhooks, we could send arbitrary data to the customers, right? Which would annoy the customers, and it would probably also annoy the developers. But overall, what we wanted to do was get the customers to not trust the developers. So if we could sow distrust between the customers and the developers, well, hopefully less customers are likely to use this as a product for committing cybercrime, and perhaps that'll save some people from getting their Discord account stolen by these people.
This one's all you.
Yeah, sorry, I was skipping through the slides. And so anyways, as he said in the first, with the first objective, one of our main goals was to report as many things as possible. And for me, right, I work primarily in the offensive space, not the defensive space. So reporting to service providers was kind of a new thing for me. And I thought, we have a very, very clear case. I mean, they literally have a website that says war malware, come by us, right? This is going to be very easy. Send screenshot to service provider and service provider will shut it down. And what I quickly found out was that none of the service providers were really willing to work with anything that we gave them. So Namecheap, their domain registrar, said that that they thoroughly investigated my allegations, but yet they were unable to validate my claim, which was kind of dumbfounding considering the fact that their website literally said that it's malware that steals your browser stuff. And then Cloudflare seemed to be very interested in just shifting blame to whatever the upstream provider was. So every time I tried to make a report to Cloudflare, they would send a report to whatever the upstream IP was, but they would be like, we're not responsible for this. We just, proxy content on our customers' behalf. And I'm like, yes, you proxy stuff on your customers' behalf, but you are a key component to getting stuff to that C2 server. So if you guys shut down, then, then we would not, then this malware would be inoperable. But Cloudflare did not seem to realize that. And so, doing all of that, we kind of realized that this was going to be a lot longer fight than we realized.
It's a live picture of Viper, by the way.
I can confirm.
So, let's see. I think this one's me. Is it me? Yeah, it is me. So in the meantime, while we're trying to get these things done, we could keep monitoring, or we could try to monitor their communications. They had this idea that they could get away with anything if they just deleted communications as soon as they happened. We could identify the customers and the staff and try to get more information about them. We could continue trying to disrupt them through getting their servers and stuff terminated through legal means. And then, of course, we could try to sow that distrust by doing a bunch of psyops, which was a lot of fun when we did do it.
So when it comes to monitoring the Discord servers, so we would join the Discord servers with our Discord client, and often what you would find is something very similar to our screenshot. There's no messages, right? And it's not because no one communicates in here. They actually have a bot that essentially automatically deletes all of the messages in the channel. And if you ever filed the report in Discord, one of the things that you kind of have to provide in your report is a URL to the offending content. And so by deleting all of the messages, you don't have a URL that's valid to report. And so they use this as a method to circumvent moderation by Discord. And then we couldn't see any messages that they were sending because they were all gone. And so, as I said, there are frequent purges that the admins do to delete all the messages. And with all of this being said, we needed a better solution to actually see what was being sent, because we couldn't simply use Discord to see what they were saying in their Discord server, because the messages would be deleted by the time I get home from work. And so the solution was a project that me and a mutual friend of ours have been developing since 2021. And so this was a project called ArcLight, which we initially conceived as being sort of a red team tool. So the basic idea behind ArcLight was it was this massive data store for unstructured and structured data that we referred to as artifacts. And these would originate from some type of operation. And we would have a rich front end that you could use to query these artifacts, so you could see everything, that you got from a red team engagement or kind of anything else. And right around this time, we were actually in the process of rewriting ArcLight. And so ArcLight itself, the original backend was a .NET application written in C#, and then we were rewriting it in Node.js. It had a GraphQL API. We had this concept of artifacts, which was essentially a structured or unstructured piece of data that was tagged with a specific name, like message, file, etc. And then all of these artifacts could be organized under a campaign. And then optionally, they could be associated with a target. So that could be a computer that you want to hack if you're on a red team, or if you're monitoring script kiddies, it could be an organization like BBY. And then on top of that, which that kind of constitutes the back end, we had a modular suite of front end tools that we developed to actually look at the data that was stored inside ArcLight. And so early on, when we first encountered BBY, we quickly started repurposing ArcLight to work for Discord messages. Now, at the time, we didn't have a good way to pull messages from Discord, so we were relying on this open source tool called Discord Chat Exporter to download Discord messages every 5 minutes and put it together in this big tarball, and then we'd feed it to an ingestion script called ArcHammer that would process the messages, post them in ArcLight, and then we had a viewable tool we had a front-end tool called GhostMine that we could use just to query the individual artifacts that were in ArcLight proper.
Yeah, so this is just a picture just showing like one of the original versions of GhostMine, an early version. There will be pictures later where we're talking about the full capability of the ArcLight and AdVast suite, and you'll see the difference. If you can just remember this, very simple, right? But obviously you can see like what channel it's in, what time it was sent, who sent it, and then you can search up at the top. So in this case, they do campaign.name, Nemesis game. That was the original campaign I think we gave for the BBY stealer. But yeah, this is a pretty cool tool. I loved having this, and you'll see later like how flexible the querying is and everything with it. So meanwhile, in the middle of all this, So we got our first win around November 30th. It seems that one of the VPSs got dropped. Namecheap, Cloudflare, and the Discord server are still up. Cloudflare, in their infinite wisdom, forwarded our reports to OVH, who then forwarded it directly to the malware developers. Real sweet, very, very good business. That was. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was a report that I sent, right? And obviously, I don't know exactly what was forwarded to the threat actor, but as you can see in the screenshot here, this is the malware developer sending a screenshot in their Discord server of the email that I sent to Cloudflare, right? And so I'm somebody who's very conscious of protecting my identity. I don't want to expose my name or my email address to these threat actors. And when I found out that like my report was sent verbatim to the threat actor, I mean, that freaked the hell out of me, right? And I'm like, come on, Cloudflare, like you shouldn't be sending, my report verbatim to the threat actor unless I said so. I don't know if there was any revealing information inside what was sent to them because the guy did not take a full screenshot of everything that he got, but it was definitely my original report was just copy and pasted and sent to this guy. And so like quickly we realized that this was ending up becoming a game of cat and mouse. Initially, I did not think that these people had any funding to purchase a new VPS, but every time we got one of their VPSs shut down, they would just quickly move on to a more obscure provider. So they were going like Hetzner, OVH, and then they were moving to like some obscure Russian provider like I don't know what their name is, like whatever, right? They were moving to obscure VPS providers that weren't necessarily taking action from the reports they were getting from Cloudflare. And then Namecheap and Cloudflare, they were refusing to terminate the domain name. So even though they were moving the new VPSs, the domain name bby.rip was still a valid domain name, and they could just update the A record and point it to whatever VPS they bought down the line. Or I guess it was pointing to Cloudflare. So they would just update Cloudflare to point to their new VPS. So just wanted to take a quick break for a second and talk about some of the cool things that we did in the future and at the time with BBY. So one of the first things that we did that was kind of really cool is they eventually started putting all their stuff behind like Cloudflare and stuff like that, right? And so to find the VPS
we actually had to mass scan the entire internet with a signature that we had from what their website returned. It actually took us probably somewhere around 2 weeks because we actually kept getting cut off and the account terminated when we were doing it. And then I was at work with someone and was talking about what we were doing, and I asked him if he had any experience with doing that, and he said, check DigitalOcean. I've had to do it before for some other research I was doing. If you just send them an email, they're usually like chill about it. So that's exactly what I did. I don't have the email. I didn't think to grab it. It's somewhere. I don't know where it's at. But yeah, I just said, hey, we're mass scanning the entire internet. We're just doing GET requests. That's all we're doing. Like, is this okay? This should be fine according to what I read in your policy. And they said, yep, thumbs up. And so we did that. And within 3 days, we found the VPS. And we were able to trace it back to the provider. And I think we eventually did get that one shut down. Or were you about to chime in? I just heard a click.
Oh, yeah. We did get it shut down.
Okay. And then this is into the future after we met the Vaccinators. So this is kind of a rough estimate, but I always remember this. And hopefully when Coder and Wonder talk about this, when they have their talk, they might go into this. But there's something like over a 2-week span with working with the Vaccinators. We estimate that we woke Bruner up anywhere between like 1 and 3 a.m. in the morning to deal with his customers screaming at him because the infrastructure was down, because we kept getting his stuff terminated. I don't have it, and I haven't been able to find it, but there was a point in time where he was lamenting on his life choices and how he kind of wants to quit. So for me, that's a huge win. That's like one of my proud moments in doing this. Get wrecked, skid. And so this is kind of how it felt, right? Just, coming in here, scissor kicking the malware developer right in the face, and just knocking spit and sweat all over the wall.
All right. So at the beginning of this talk, I mentioned that I was provided a sample of BBY from some mutual acquaintance. And at some point, so we started this at around Thanksgiving 2022. So that's around November 25th, 2022. On December 18th, I received a message from the initial person who provided me with the sample, and he said, holy shit, they made me a mod. And I was like, wait, what? And so it turns out that when I sent him my findings on BBY, he actually joined their Discord server, and he decided that he was going to try to befriend the actual developer of BBY themselves. And when he said that he was a mod, our thought was, okay, crap, like we got this thing where we can collect messages that are sent in Discord. We need you to help us get as many messages as possible so we can put this in our system and we can actually see what's going on in all of these channels that we would not have access to because we're not mods in the server. And he was willing to cooperate. And we provided him with a rudimentary bash script. We said, hey, run this on your computer. Here's this open source thing. Like, it's completely trustworthy. Run this and target it against the server that the threat actor is in. And then we set up a VPS that he would SCP the results to that. He would SCP it to this dead drop VPS where we had a script running that would then automatically take those and then ingest it into ArcLight in a sort of automated fashion. And so while this was happening, we realized that the tool that we developed, Ghostmind, wasn't really sufficient for viewing a lot of the stuff that we were getting in context. And so I came up with the idea of, well, we need to develop something that can kind of render these messages in a way where we can look at it as if we were on Discord. And so Harmonic Symphony was invented, which was our tool to visualize these chat messages that were coming in from our informant.
Which one? Oh, yeah. So what all did we get from this? So previously we were getting stuff in all the public channels, right? But that's ended up mostly being a lot of bragging. At some point they were interacting with the bot in specific channels directly between the bot and the user. or the customer. So with this now expanded admin access, we had all the admin moderator channels. We had the support tickets, and we could see all of the private channels the bot created, where it would drop the webhook URL and allow the customers to do bot commands. So this is us during the happy times here, where we just found this huge gold mine. We were clapping and very happy about this. And let's see. So what can we do with all this stuff? Big part of it was delete the webhooks. So we looked up the spec for it and found out that you could just straight up delete at least Discord webhooks with 0 authentication. And so later on down the line, you'll see a thing that we talk about in ArcLight that allowed us to do that as we saw them come in automatically. We could get logs of all the known customers, and we got all the staff communications, which gave us a larger web of Discord servers to go ahead and investigate.
So as we mentioned before, one of the things that we wanted to kind of do against these guys was essentially perform psyops against them. And as Wraith just mentioned, we were able to collect the communications with the customers. So early on in the slide, I mentioned that they used a ticketing system, right? So if you wanted to buy BBY, you would have to create a ticket with their ticket bot. Now that would create a private chat that only you and the moderators would be in. So if you were just some rando in their Discord server, you couldn't see these tickets. It was only the moderators who could see them. Now that we had this confidential source who was inside the BBY Discord server and they were downloading their messages, we had this huge collection of messages that were sent inside these private ticket channels. And so we were able to use that to compile a list of every known customer of BBY based on the tickets. And using this, what we did was we set up this website that essentially enumerated every single customer. And as I mentioned earlier, the malware itself, it exfils your password and your Discord information via a URL that has a username in it. And generally that is your Discord username, at least back during this time period, it was your Discord username. So we were able to come up with a pretty big list of endpoints that exfil from the malware would be sent to. And using this, we were able to set up this website, and then we sent requests to the bby.rip C2 server that would post a message in all of these customers' webhook channels that sent them to this website where we had a full list of all of the customers who purchased BBY. We had all the staff accounts. We had general information on BBY, as well as other evidence from other community members that seemed to indicate that BBY itself was dual hooked, meaning that if you sent the malware to like a Discord admin, then the BBY actors would receive that username and password instead of the customer. And so we sent this to all of the customers with our intention being just to make them not trust BBY because their stuff is getting spammed with this this malicious website that we made. All right. And getting vaccinated. So So while we were doing all of this, there happened to be another group that was trying to essentially do the same thing. So while we were doing all of this, one thing that we were interested in was BBY samples because they were updating the API endpoints and we wanted to collect new samples so we could see how we could mess with that. So we had the correct URLs to send to. And in the process of doing that, I came across some BBY samples on VirusTotal. And I found some people in the comments and I sent an email to one of them, and that's how we found the Vaccinator project. And once we found them, we had this huge collection of messages that we were collecting on BBY. And so we wanted to give them access to that data. However, they had a lot of members and we had some very sensitive sources with our Dreamcatcher asset. And so we wanted to ensure that we could protect that equity with very, very granular access control. And so we had to implement the correct measures to ensure that we could protect that equity. So our ArcLight application, we added some very, very, very granular security controls to it. So as I mentioned before, ArcLight consists of artifacts. So an artifact can be a message, it can be an attachment that you added to a message. And so what we did was every single message that was ingested into ArcLight, we associated that with a campaign. And if you had an account on ArcLight, you had to be added to that campaign, and as artifacts came in, they were added to that campaign. And then if you were not in that campaign, you did not have access to that artifact. Additionally, every single artifact had one or more security labels, and users also had security labels. So if you tried to access an artifact, an access check was performed where your labels were compared with the labels that were on the artifact. And if you did not contain all of the same security labels, you would be rejected and you would not be allowed to access that artifact. And then in addition, if I was going to give you access to a label, there was a mandatory security briefing that you would have to accept. That way, if you were an end user and you were being given access to our Dreamcatcher source, which was our confidential informant, it would explain to you that this is protecting somebody who has access to very sensitive information inside BBY. And if you disclose this information, then you could potentially compromise our source. And so we made that very clear to our users that they were being given access to data that is very sensitive. You can go to the next slide. And so this is a screenshot from a modern version of ArcLight. Earlier, we were showing screenshots of development versions, but this is the most recent version. And if you were given access to, say, Dreamcatcher, which was our confidential source, you would not be able to actually view those messages until you accepted this briefing, which clearly explained to you what Dreamcatcher was and the fact that that was a very confidential source, and you should only share this with other people who have access to this so you don't disclose that sensitive source of collection. Additionally, we also wanted to be able to share the data that we're collecting in ArcLight with our partners. And so we added this API that we call artifact triggers, where a subscriber could essentially set up a rule and say, hey, if somebody says something that contains a regular expression that matches a Discord invite, send a message to this webhook. And so using that, go to the next slide.
We, yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Back up. So using that, one of the things we put together is real-time notifications for the Vaccinators, and we called it Sauron. And basically for webhooks, Discord invites, and BBY commands that they were sent, they would automatically get a channel or get a message into a channel that had a link to where to view it in Ghostmine and like what specifically it was and who sent it and everything. So made us feel like, the all-seeing eye is pretty sweet. But yeah, there are other uses for that that we'll talk about later too. And all right, so now we're moving on to, we're gonna go ahead and take a couple minutes and talk about ArcLight itself and all of its capabilities. So basically, at the start of everything, or whenever we'd found, I'll say, unscrupulous servers or places where these people hung out, we essentially had to have collection agents. So these were applications that we could attach to a user that had access to those servers. So we had Quantum Harvest, which was the Discord client that eventually got developed. So it would automatically, without our interaction, pick up and exfiltrate those messages into ArcLight. Fifth Winter, which was the interactive Discord client. That one was really cool. I think you used a TUI, if I remember, for that, but you could select what messages and what things you wanted to ingest. Bionic Harvest, which was a Telegram-focused client. And then we had Foul Harvest, which was at the time named Twitter, but now X. And that came about from some other stuff that I think Wonder and Coder will talk about, where another actor was very heavily using Twitter. And so we wanted to also collect those messages as well. And then, so one of the first things that we had here was Soul Karen. Oh, goodness. And it's a target profiling tool. So it allows us to basically have a profile for an actor or a campaign or an organization, and it allows us to create associations between all these different identities that they would have, or even associations between them and other folks. And then it would show aggregated communications from all of those associated accounts. So you can see here, this is just kind of like the landing, or one of the landing pages. You can see we're under the Nemesis game campaign, and we have actors, and we have Bruno here, who is the developer. We put in the notes that he's the main developer. And we could see his associations to other people through kind of like a graph interface. We had all the different account identifiers there in that tab. And then one of the cool things here is this recent communications tab. And this would essentially go through, right, all of the raw queryable information, and it would find anything with any of his account identifiers on it, and you would see in real time what are the last messages he sent, what's the most recent thing that he sent, where did he send it at, and you could see it, all the information that he was sending in one spot.
So as I mentioned earlier, when we got our confidential source Dreamcatcher, we wanted a tool that would allow us to actually visualize the chat messages. And so I came up with Harmonic Symphony, which was our social media native viewing experience. So it had custom styling for Twitter, Discord, and Telegram, where it would actually try to render messages in a format that looked like it was on its native app. So Discord would try to look like it was Discord, Twitter would look like Twitter, Telegram would look like Twitter, or Telegram would look like Telegram, rather. And then in addition to that, it also had additional capabilities to identify alternate accounts. So the screenshot right now, this is actually the homepage where we can look at all of the servers or the collection sources that we are monitoring that are being ingested into ArcLight, and we can see that it actually differentiates whether or not it's Telegram, Twitter, or Discord with an actual custom icon. So we can look and we can see the last message. And then if you click on one of these, it'll actually take you into the native viewing experience where it will render something that's very similar to if you were using the native client for that application. So this is from our Dreamcatcher source, and we're actually looking at a private ticket inside BBY. And you can see that we have a list on the right that has everybody who has talked in that channel that we can observe anyways with ArcLight Collection. We can search through all of the material with the search box at the top, and then on the left we can navigate between all the different channels. And then if you were to click on one of the usernames, excuse me, sorry, something's in my throat. If you were to click on one of the usernames, we actually added some really cool analytics that would attempt to identify. Sorry, there's something. Oops, sorry, something went down my throat. So if you were to click on one of these accounts, you can actually see a list of likely alternative accounts. And basically we would do some string comparisons where we would assess usernames of other accounts based on string similarity, and we would compile a list of likely alternative accounts that have a string that is similar to the username that you're looking at. So in this picture, he clicked on Stanley, and you can see there's a whole bunch of different Discord accounts that are also called Stanley. Now, a lot of these were because this user got banned a lot of times, so you would have to make a new account every time he got banned. And then additionally, you can see there's a recently conversed tab, and if you were to click on that, you would actually see accounts that sent messages around the same time as that user in the same channel. So we could get an idea of, okay, there's this bad actor, now who do they talk to?
And then I just want to chime in for a second here too, because we didn't capture it in the screenshot. But the same thing earlier, remember Ghostmine? We showed that, and I said that was like an early version. And before this, I think we had showed a Harmonic Symphony picture, and that was an early version. This was much more the later version. Notice how it's fleshed out. You have searching, and you have like all the users in the channel or in the server on the right and stuff like that. Another thing that was really cool, or at least I found it was cool about Harmonic Symphony, is I was doing less of like the back-end development here, while Viper and his our third partner was doing more of that. So I was more of like the beta tester for a lot of things. And so one of the things I'd requested was a lot of these servers, they spoke not English. And so there's actually right within Harmonic Symphony, you can hover over messages and you can click the translate for me, and it will attempt to use, I forget what library it was they used, and Viper probably could talk about that more.
It's Libra Translate.
Libra Translate? Okay. It would translate the message right in front of you into English, which is really freaking cool. And is super useful. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that piece.
Cool. So Ghostmine. So this was our kind of initial, the initial front end for ArcLight. It is a raw query tool that lets us look at the artifacts that are in ArcLight in just a raw table. And so we actually developed a custom query language that's similar to Apache Lucene that we could use to query artifacts. So on the back end, ArcLight, it used to actually use MySQL, and then we switched to a database called Arango. And one of the caveats of that is we wanted to be able to allow the user to actually perform in-depth queries. So we wrote a query language that compiles to the database language, the database query language called AQL, and that allows you to perform queries against the data using a syntax that's very similar to Apache Lucene. So you could do something like content : and then you could do slashes to do regex /bby, and that would search for anything that matches that regex expression. And so he pulled up a screenshot now. This is the interface for Ghostmine, where I'm searching for any message that contains the content matching BBY as a regex expression, and you can see all the messages that that come back.
And it's worth noting here too, another thing, or at least I found it really cool about this, was you could there's more than just like being able to do one piece of this query. Like you could do a compound query. So you could say, I want any message from Bruno that talks about BBY or Stanley under this campaign name, and you could return all of those results, which was pretty sweet. You could also like filter by classification and pretty much anything, if I remember right. Or were there only certain rows that you could query?
No, you could literally search on anything. You could do anything, and you could compound it with and or whatever.
Right.
And so we also had this really useful account lookup tool that we added later on, where you could post the ID of somebody from Telegram or Discord or whatever. And then if you were to enter that up, it would perform a query where it would show you which servers they talk into. It would try to identify similar accounts using the same algorithm I mentioned earlier, where it's just looking for similar strings. And then you can get an idea of who this person may have been talking to, somebody who may have been sending messages around the same time they were in the same channels. And so you can use that to jump to people who might be related to them.
So next we have chronology, and this was our reporting tool. So it allowed you to write and edit intelligence reports, use triggers to disseminate those report links to subscribers, and then it supported tags and comments. And so yeah, so this is basically a list of the chronology reports that you can see. This was also controlled by basically labeling and everything on there. And then you can see here in an example, we have one of our reports that we wrote, and we were able to basically, we were going through this data as well. And since we were disseminating it to the Vaccinators, we wanted to be able to try and do our own analytics on it and see if we could provide basically opinions on what we think was going on. And yeah, so it was just a tool that we used to send out reports. And again, we sent it to one of the channels in the Vaccinators, and yeah. So next up, we have kind of our findings, right? So primarily, or wait, was this one you? No, this one's me. So the question that we started out, I think, on this whole thing, and this is like what got us onto it, besides the fact that, you know, these guys were being scumbags, is why were they doing this? And what we discovered is the primary reason for doing this was financial. if you recall earlier when I talked about badges on Discord accounts, besides the obvious things like credit cards and whatnot, there is apparently a really sweet dark market for Discord accounts with valuable badges. And so the customers would pay for access to the malware. They'd use the malware to steal accounts, and then they would turn around and sell those accounts either to freaking other like guys using malware or malware authors, or other people who stole their mom's credit card and they wanted to have a really sweet hype badge or something and they couldn't get one. And then they also would use them for server takeovers where they would kind of like raid the server.
So here's a really cool example where we were able to actually use ArcLight to attribute a malicious action that was performed by some random script kiddie utilizing BBY. So Mr. Mumbo Jumbo, he is a popular Minecraft YouTuber with over 9.4 million subscribers. And in early 2022, his Discord server was compromised, and we were able to actually utilize ArcLight to attribute it to a specific BBY customer. So during this raid, the actual threat actor used an account called Betson, and he nominated himself as being the Mumbo Jumbo. And of course, he, demoted all of the, the former admins and moderators, and he kicked them out of the server before utilizing the announcement server to send invites to his own Discord servers that had malicious executables. You can see in the screenshot that he's saying, test my game. Well, if you were to join there would be a executable that was BBY. And if you were to download that and run that, then you would have your stuff sent to BBY. And so, using that screenshot, right, where we knew there was this high profile raid of this YouTuber that happened on Discord, utilizing ArcLight, we're able to perform a query of that username. And so we said, hey, show me any message that was sent from any account that had the display name of Benson. And what we found was several messages that were sent inside the internal BBY Discord server. And then in addition, we actually have tickets that were sent by that user inside the BBY Discord server. And so this was one day prior to that raid. We actually have the transaction where Betson bought BBY. So you can see in here that he is trying to sell both a Discord account and purchase BBY for cryptocurrency. And one of the BBY moderators sends their cryptocurrency wallet and they perform a transaction. And this user is now given access to BBY. And so elsewhere on the server, they have a channel called Vouches, which is where you can essentially brag about what the crimes you commit with BBY. And so right after that purchase, we have him bragging about the accounts that he compromised. So we're sending these screenshots here of the accounts that were compromised with the BBY malware.
And then the another thing that we found was the Hype WTS Telegram marketplace. And it's just a marketplace that they would use for stolen accounts. There was about around 2,500 participants. And then June 2022, we had stopped being able to pull any collect from them. So what did we achieve with all this? What end did we get to? Well, over the course of the about 2 years, we had performed collection against 141 unique targets. We had ingested over 18 million messages, deleted hundreds, probably more of webhooks. We had our 3-day mass scan to find a VPS. This probably is on the low end, and this is also, I'm including the numbers from basically the collect that we got that the Vaccinators would report and whatnot. But we costed them a lot of money by having their infrastructure go down by terminating their stuff. We'd found over 1 million variations of the word grabbed, at least 200 porons in the servers, and we have at least one skid who rethought that the career path he had chosen was not that fun. So when I say that we found 1 million versions of the word grabbed, these guys, for some reason, didn't want to say grabbed. That's what they called doing this. So they would do things like, give me the quabber. I want to buy the quabber, glebbed, glabbers, as you can see over there. And we found it pretty funny to the point where we memed on it every time we talked. And we would talk in as leet speak as we could when referring to grabbers. And it's now our official stance that it really should be in the official lexicon, and I'll fight you for it if you think otherwise. I think this one's you.
All right, so yeah, some of the challenges that we had to that we encountered. Our hardest thing was getting past all of the fraud prevention measures, which like Discord and stuff and these email providers have, which of course that's a good thing, right? For, running against attackers, but it was really hard for us to create alternative accounts. Wraith and I actually went to Target one day so we could buy like burner phones and cash so we could create so we could create new accounts to help us monitor these, because once our accounts got banned, that was a huge blowback from us because we would get banned just for being in these servers. And so we had to have accounts on standby to replace the ones that got banned.
I want to chime in really quick here before
you go for it.
And on that note too, and Viper can attest to this, I probably had a minor mental breakdown just trying to stand up an alternate account. I tried every trick that I knew in the book to not associate anything with me with this account, including going down to a McDonald's that I had never been on the Wi-Fi from with a VM on a laptop that I had never used, and tried to set up an account and had to ask for phone verification constantly. So I had lost my mind trying to stand up alternate accounts. Apparently it was easier for Viper. He had less issues, but we did at one point resort to like you said, going down and grabbing a bunch of SIM cards so that we could, swap them in the phone and use that to verify the account for text messages.
Our most effective way of doing this was we had a friend who was going and he was flying. Our other partner was going to Los Angeles for his company, so he had to fly a plane to get there, obviously, and he just made a bunch of accounts in the airport, and that was actually probably our best way of creating alt accounts for these operations. But in addition to that, as we got their VPSs shut down, these guys started going to more and more obscure hosting providers, and they were not as likely to cooperate with reports as, say, the big ones like Vulture or OVH or whatever. And then
they would hold on to their accounts too. That was the other thing. So they would the developers even would pop a bunch of accounts and then they would just sit on them. And whenever their account got banned and the server got banned, they would just immediately switch to one of those new accounts that wasn't sitting in any of those servers, and they would be able to stand up a whole new server immediately. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is a hypothesis. I don't think we've ever confirmed this, but our suspicion on this aspect was that they would utilize victim accounts and then just rename it, right? Because obviously they have plenty of Discord accounts that they could repurpose if they wanted to. So I believe they were using victim accounts every time they got banned.
Yeah. Next slide. So with all this, for any of you viewers watching, what can I do, right? Teach everyone you know. I've told plenty of people who use Discord who are not security minded. If it's a friend's account, well, one, if anyone reaches out to you saying play my game, don't do it. Two, if it's a friend's account, verify with them through some other factor that the person you're talking to is indeed your friend. Report the account to Discord, report the link and the malware samples to Virus Total. Also send those in the report to Discord, and then find communities like the Vaccinators, Fish. That's I think another community they have that does something that's not working on these guys but similar. And then there's other communities out there, and try to fight the good fight. And then just because I love memes, just your average Discord user right here. You know how it goes. They just draw 25 anyways. and then just contact information. So, oh gosh, there's my email. We have the email for the Vaccinators too. I originally had that in here because I wanted to give them credit. And then I have a blog that I haven't posted to in some time because life has been getting in the way. But yeah, if you're interested in following blogs, I will be posting security content to that soon, TM. And with that, are there any questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is, I mean, so it seems like this is all that taking over a bunch of Discord accounts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, with a bunch of other stuff added in, right? So basically, it's like if you have a Discord account and all you have is a username and password on it, right? I mean, if somebody takes it over, I mean, it's really just about authenticating yourself as a user, right? So it's like as a mitigation step, right? If Discord's kind of like the linchpin of all this, if they just like forced everybody to use a proper second factor, right? Not two-step, but like two-factor or more, right? Then wouldn't that kind of just be a mitigation sort of step across the board for all this?
So actually, no.
Am I misunderstanding it?
Yeah. Viper, do you want to take it? I'll let you take it because I was going to answer it.
Yeah, I got this. And some of the folks from the Vaccinators can probably explain this a little bit more because I was never that interested in the technical aspect of how this malware worked because it was pretty unsophisticated. But my understanding of how it worked is it actually would write code into the Discord client because the Discord client is just a JavaScript app. It's an Electron app, right? And so it would actually write code that would be ran in the context of your user on your computer. And I believe that that would actually do essentially a reset on your password from your own computer. I believe if anyone from the Vaccinators can chime in on that.
Right, but the thing is like if it allows somebody to basically insert some sort of shim to basically go, okay, I can now change this guy's password, right? Well, but if the account has a second factor on it, that password's not enough, right?
So the way the malware was working, it was still your Discord token. When a user, if the token was stolen and they pop it into their Discord browser client, they're still logged in as you. You changing your password, changing your two-factor authentication wouldn't reset that token. That was an issue on Discord side, and we've talked to their developers and their security team before about like fixing this issue. And their complaint was that it was just too much work to implement.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you got Discord. Maybe they can improve things. They don't.